Okay, good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well. Today we are learning Maseches Shavuos Daf Mem Dalid. We'll also be catching up a little bit, and we'll be finishing up the Mishnah, which is a very lengthy Mishnah that starts at the Perek of Mem Dalid and Beis, and is basically a full Amud. As has become typical throughout Maseches Shavuos, all the Mishnayos are grouped together in the beginning of the Perek, which is somewhat uncommon, but nevertheless, that is the structure here. So let's start from the bottom of Mem Gimel Amud Beis, about 8 lines from the bottom where it says Lema Ketanoi. On Shabbos, we learned the sheet of Shmuel, and there's a bit of a discussion in the Amoraim as to whether or not the collateral, if it is different than the cost of the item, if it is equal to the cost of the item, is that considered an equivalent trade? And therefore, if the owner lost it, too bad, you lost the equivalent of the loan, you lost the mashkon, and therefore you're done. Or, like Shmuel says, and this is a little bit of a chiddush, that even if the mashkon is less than the cost of the loan and you lose it, you're still going to lose out. So perhaps, says the Gemara, Lema Kitanoi, this Gemara, like many Gemaras in Shavuos, does require a good amount of time to unpack. We, of course, don't have an ample time, so I will give 110% effort to stay as clear as possible. Let's get started. Lema Kitanoi. Perhaps this machlokes about whether or not the value being similar, the value of the mashkon being similar to the loan, means that the loan is going to be reneged if you lose the item. Maybe that's a machlokes tanoi. And the Gemara says, Hamalves chaveru al hamashkon ve'avad hamashkon. Let's say that I lend something and you give me collateral in turn, and then I lost that item. So it says the Gemara, Yishava v'yitol esma oso. The malve who lent the money, he can make a shavua and say, I did have the collateral, I lost it, but I'm still allowed to make a shavua to recoup my losses. So if I lend Gerald $100, Gerald gives me a pen that's worth $3. So, and Gerald loses the pen. So then the din is that Gerald can make a shavua and he can recoup even the $100 that he lent me. David Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi
If you lose the pen I gave you.
What?
If you lose the pen I gave you.
Am I the malva? What was our case? I lent you $100. You give me a pen and I lose it. That's correct. So that's Rabbi Eliezer. Says the Gemara, Rabbi Akiva Omer, Yachal Hu, the Love could argue, Sheyomar Lo, Klum Hilvisani, Ela al Hamashkon, Avad Hamashkon, Avdo Mosecha. What are you talking about? You don't make a shvu and take my money, says Rabbi Akiva to Rabbi Eliezer. You lost my mashkon. The mashkon was the hook that enabled you or me, the malva, to get my money back. So if I lost the mashkon, that's the equivalent of losing the item, of losing the dollars. And therefore, you're not allowed to recollect your dollars. So let's just get out of the weeds for a second. If I have collateral, is that the equivalent of the loan or is it representative of the loan, right? That's kind of the chakira that we're asking here. This is the machlokes that we're seeing on Shabbos between Shmuel and Rav Nachman, and today, potentially between Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Is the mashkon the equivalent? It is the dollar value representation of the loan, and therefore, if I, the malve, lose your mashkon, then you don't have to pay me back, or no? So Rabbi Eliezer says the malve always has the right to make a shvua. Rabbi Akiva says nothing doing. Avar hamashkon avdo ma'usecha, that the love can say to the malve, you did a bad job watching my mashkon, and therefore you don't get your money back. Now, all of this is the brisa where they argue. Aval, says the brisa, Hamal ve'elav zuz bishtar, if $1,000 was lent bishtar, v'hiniach mashkon biyado, divrei hakol avad hamashkon avad ma'osa. When there's a star and a mashkon involved, so then, says the Gemara, everyone agrees that the malveh who lost, that the malveh who lost the mashkon will lose his entire loan. End of brisa. And the Gemara posits that perhaps this machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva is representative of the machlokas between Shmuel and the Chachamim of whether or not we say the mashkon is the equivalent of the dollars, and therefore, if you lose it, if you lose the mashkon, you lose your dollars, or no. No, it's just a zichron ba'alma, it's just a representation of the loan, and even if he loses it, you can make a shvua machlokas Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. So says the Gemara, I hear you, but we first need to get clarity on what the case is. Hey Chidami, last line of Mem Gimel Amud Beis. Hey Chidami, shavi shiur zuzeh. If the case that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva are handling about is a case where the cost of the mashkon is exactly the cost of the loan, right? I need cash. So my AirPods are $100. I say, look, I really need cash right now. I need $100. My AirPods are $100. You take this and give me $100. We make this transaction. If the mashkon is the same cost as the loan itself, so then my tamei de Rabbi Eliezer. Why would Rabbi Eliezer say that he's allowed to make a shvuah? It's clear, it's crystal clear that I gave you an item that's shavit to the loan because in the event that I can't pay, you have no loss. It's clear. Elalav. Therefore, that can't be what Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva are handling about in the Brisa. Top of them, Dalad Ronald, Elalav, Bidelo Shavi Shir Zuze, Ubidishmuel Kamiflage. The Gemara says we're not talking about a case where it's Shavi Shir Zuze. We're not talking about a case where the mashkon is equal to the cost of the loan. Therefore, what we're talking about is Ubidish Shmuel Kamiflage. So this is the Gemara's developed approach of the Lema Ketanoin. Now, what is it that the Brisa of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva must be talking about? It's talking about a case where I borrow $100, but, and this is my favorite pen, I give you this pen. It's $3, $4. Love these pens, but I give it to you as collateral because it's chashuv to me. What did you give me in return? $100. So it has to be, says the Gemara, because otherwise Rabbi Eliezer doesn't make sense in the Brisa. It has to be that the case of the machlokas of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva is where the mashkon that's given as a placeholder for the loan is lower than the cost of the actual loan. And what is it that they're arguing about? Whether or not we agree with Shmuel. What did Shmuel say? This was yesterday's Gemara. And Shmuel, in the middle of Mem Gimel Amud Beis, had said that if somebody lent $1,000 to a friend and they gave the handle of a sickle, that if they lost the handle of the sickle, they lost 1,000. Meaning he held that any mashkon, even when it's way lower than the cost, this is $3, but you lent me 100 or 1,000. If you lose this, says Shmuel, you lose the whole thing. Not that this is worth 1,000. But it's mamish, it's the embodiment of the loan, Shmuel held. And perhaps that's what the machlokas is in the Tanaim. That according to Rabbi Eliezer says the guy can make a shvuah and get his loan back, no problem. He doesn't hold of Shmuel. Masha'en Kain, according to Rabbi Akiva, he holds exactly that. Rabbi Akiva said over here that the lova can say back to the malveh, Avad hamashkon, Avad avdu ma'usecha. So Rabbi Akiva is a party line with Shmuel. Rabbi Eliezer is not. And that's how the Gemara suggests that perhaps the din of Shmuel is subject to a machlokes tanoim.
Who would lend money under those circumstances?
What?
Who would lend money under those circumstances?
Yeah. You don't know how much I like these pens. I mean, it really does depend on what's happening, right? So sometimes I'll give you a great example where we do this and it works every time, even though the cost of the item is not the same. If I go into like a government building and they want to make sure that I don't leave the building without them knowing, they'll take my driver's license. My driver's license is 10 cents of plastic, 4 hours at the DMV, but 10 cents of plastic. But what I borrowed is $1,000. So there are times that which is not shaveh, you're right. For me, I know I wouldn't get my money back if you didn't come collect your license, but I know you're motivated to come get your license. So we can create scenarios where the malveh would still loan, even though the dollars are not even, for sure. So this is the Gemara's suggestion. And the Gemara responds, lo, I don't agree. Shmuel is not really represented in this machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. Lo, that's not true. Really, bidelo shavi, when we're talking about a case where the value of the mashkon is not equal, this was Eric's case, where he's saying that who would even do that, right? It's bidelo shavi, kule alma leislahu de Shmuel. Everyone agrees that the pen, which is $3, won't cancel the loan of $1,000. Everyone agrees to that. V'hacha, what is our case? Bideshavi shir zuzi. We really are talking about a case where the mashkon is equal to the cost of the loan. And what is it that Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva are arguing about? Ubed Rabbi Yitzchak kamiflage. They're arguing about the sheet of Rabbi Yitzchak. What does Rabbi Yitzchak hold? Says the Gemara, the Amar Rabbi Yitzchak, 5 lines down on Mem Daled Amud Aleph. Minayin lebal chov shekona mashkon. How do we know that when I, the malveh, lend money and you give me a mashkon to hold, that I mamish become the owner of that mashkon? The pasuk says that to you there is righteousness. If you, in fact, you aren't kona the mashkon, so then tzedakah minayin lo. What kind of righteousness is it to give it back if it's not yours? Elamai, it must be that when I give the mashkon, that you own it. Mikan lebalcho shekona mashkon. And perhaps in this case, we have a machlokas between Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer. That Rabbi Akiva, in this particular case, would hold like Shmuel. That could be. But then the Gemara says, no. You're trying to attribute the machlokas of Rabbi Akiva and Rabbi Eliezer to the din of Rabbi Yitzchak. That's not possible. V'tizbara. Amar de Amar Rabbi Yitzchak. When does Rabbi Yitzchak hold his din that a Baal Chov is Koneh the Mashkon? That's Shelo B'Shas Halva. That's only true when the mashkon is given at a later time than the halva. So let's play this out. I say to Eric, I'm going to lend you $1,000. You don't have to give me a mashkon today, but you have to give me a mashkon next week. So June 1st, I lend him $1,000. June 10th, he comes back and says, Phil, here's my mashkon. It's this $5 pen, and I gave him a $5 loan. The case has to be where they're shaveh according to this approach. So says the Gemara, maybe Rav Yitzchak's din that the malva is kona a mashkon is only when the mashkon and the halva don't happen at the same time. But mashkano b'shas halva mi amar. Would anyone ever say that there's a machlokes where the halva is at the same time? No, what? No way. Everyone agrees that when the halva is not at the time of the mashkon, when the mashkon is not at the time of the halva, everyone agrees that he's a Baal Chov Kona. But lav dafka in the case that where the mashkon is given at the same time as the halva. And says the Gemara, v'hacha, in our case, what must we then be talking about with Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva? V'mashkeno b'shas halva aso. We're talking about a case where the mashkon, where the collateral was given at the same time as the loan, uv'shomer aveda kamiflage. And we're talking about the application back to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva about the case of shomer aveda, which is a well-known sugya from Bava Kama and from Bava Metzia. And that is, if I'm watching a lost item, so then what is my din, what is my status in regards to that item? Am I a shomer chinam? I find a lost item. I find this pen, and I hold it and I put up signs. I hold it until further notice. What's my achrayus during that time that I'm holding the pen? Am I a shomer chinam, lowest level of responsibility, or am I a shomer sachar, a higher level of responsibility? This is a machlokas amoraim. The itmar we see in the amoraim shomer aveda. Rabba Omar kishomer chinam. Rabba says that a person watching an item is like a shomer chinam, low level of responsibility. Turning to the top of Mem Daled Amud Beis, the Rabbi Yosef Amar, no. He is kishomer sachar dama. He has a higher level of achrayus. And Rabbi Akiva, attaching this machlokas back to our case, Rabbi Akiva would be this second shita of Rabbi Yosef, that is kishomer sachar dami. That's what the Gemara suggests. And that could then be the machlokas back to Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. Says the Gemara, are you kidding? Lema de Rabbi Yosef Tanoihi, you're telling me that the shita of Rabbi Yosef is subject to the machlokas of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva? No. That's not true, because b'shomer aveda halacha l'maisa, when we talk about a person who's watching an item that he found, tekule alma islahu de Rabbi Yosef, everyone agrees you're shomer sachar. So therefore, what would Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva be arguing about? V'acha v'malve tzarech lemashkon kemiflagi. We're talking about a case of malve tzarech lemashkon. Here, what is this discussion? So it says the Gemara as follows. Mar savar mitzvah ka'avid. One shita is that when the malva has the desire to give a loan, even if he gives a loan, but there's a mashkon, he still gets a mitzvah. Mar savar lav mitzvah ka'avid. That if the malva only gives a loan when there is a mashkon, then he has not performed a mitzvah. So it could be there are various explanations basically as to how to understand the machlokes of Rabbi Eliezer and Rabbi Akiva. All of this is a very long-winded approach to say that our first approach of Lema Kitanoi, that perhaps the din of Shmuel is connected to a machlokes Tanoim, is not connected to a machlokes Tanoim. Again, long-winded, but that's our conclusion. And then the Gemara says, perhaps we should try again. Lema Kitanoi, again, that the din of Shmuel. Let's remember what Shmuel said. Shmuel said that even kata de magla, even the handle of a sickle, if that's what's left as collateral for my $10,000 loan, that avad kata de magla, if you lose it, you lose your whole loan. That's what Shmuel said. And the Gemara is trying to see if there are Mari Makomos in the Tanaim that hold this way. So let's try again. We're 5-6 lines down on Mem Dalet Amud Beis. Hamalves chaveru ala mashkon v'nichnasa shmita. Let's say I lent you money, you give me a mashkon back, and then shmita enters. Now shmita, we know, typically breaks loans, but when there's a mashkon, things are different. Afal pi she'eino shava ele palga, even if, like Shmuel, kata de magla, even if the cost of the mashkon is less than that of the loan, eino meshamet. The loan does not get nullified in Shemitah. Any collateral, no matter the equivalence of the collateral to the loan, any amount of collateral that is given prevents a loan from being canceled. By the way, this is like a great loophole, like a prusbal. If you have a loan that you don't want to be meshamet, give him a shoelace. Here's my shoelace to guarantee our loan. It's a loophole.
Why even do principal then?
Why even do we may not paskin like him? But I don't know the answer to your question. I had the same thought, but that afal pisha eno shava elapalga. Reb Shimon ben Gamliel holds eno meshamin. Reb Yehuda Hanasi Omer, it depends. Im haya mashkono keneged chovo eno meshamin. If the cost of the loan, the cost of the mashkon, is equal to the cost of the loan, that's when Shemitah doesn't nullify your loan. However, says Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, v'im lav, if the cost of the loan is Shmuel's case, kata de magla, the handle of the sickle against a $10,000 loan, the kata de magla is in aisle 6 of Home Depot for $5. That's not shava b'shava. So says Rabbi Yehuda Nasi, then Shemitah will be meshamet. So here we seem to have a machlokes as to whether or not something of a lesser value, if it is lost, would you then be held accountable? Would you lose that? And we can see over here that according to Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, no matter what, you don't lose your loan. And according to Reb Yehuda, you do. So says the Gemara, wait 1 second. My eno mishamet teka amar tanakama. I don't understand what Reb Shimon ben Gamliel meant when he said that afal pi she'eno shava elapalga eno meshamet. What did he mean when he said that even if the collateral is less than half the value, eno meshamet? Ilema kenegdo, if what he meant was that the amount of the collateral, let's say the amount of the collateral is $10, and the amount of the loan is $10,000, so at least there's some savings here, that only the value of the loan that's equivalent to the mashkon, that will not be mishamet. Fine. So let's just speak it out. Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel would hold that if I have a $10,000 loan and I have a $3 pen as collateral, so he would hold potentially that $3 of the loan of the 10,000 is eno meshamet, because I have something against it. If that's true, says the Gemara, and we're on Mem Dalet Amud Beis about 10 lines down, Michlal, that implies Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi Savar Kenegdo Nami Meshamet. That implies, if you say that that's what the Tanakama means, that Rabbi Yehuda Nasi would also hold that the $3 would also be Meshamet, which doesn't make sense. Because if it did make sense, Elamai Tafis Mashkon, what then would be the point of having a mashkon at all? Zero value. Doesn't matter at all. Elalav, it must be that Rebbe really holds keneged kulo. It must be that really Rebbe holds that it's only the whole value of the item. Ubid Shmuel kamiflige, and Rebbe. One shita holds of him, and one shita does not hold of Shmuel. And maybe perhaps We see over here that this machlokes between Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel and Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi is really connected to Shmuel, where according to Shmuel, he aligns with Rabbi Yehuda Hanasi, but Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel doesn't. Says the Gemara, we're rejecting this equivalence too. You're trying hard to get a machlokes Tanaim connected to Shmuel. There just isn't one. How does the Gemara reject this example of the machlokes between Rabbi Lazar, Rabbi Shimon ben Gamliel, and Rabbi Yehuda Nasi? Lo, says the Gemara, as we approach the halfway mark of the page and the end of the parak, la'olam kenegdo. Really, what we're talking about is the amount of the value of the mashkon against the loan. B'hakamiflagi. Tanakama savar kenegdo. He holds that only that amount is considered canceled in Shemitah. Rabbi Yehuda Nasi savar kenegdo nami mishamit. That's also canceled. Everything is canceled. So that's their machlokes. Is the kenegdo would still be eno mishamit. Rabbi Yehuda would say no, all of it is mishamit. Remember, we asked a question on this a couple of lines ago. Why would the Tanakama even hold that way? Why would Rabbi Yehuda Nasi even hold that way if it's all canceled anyways? Says the Gemara, you're right. There was really no halachic value of the mashkon. It was lezikaron dvarim ve'alma. It's commemorative. It's representative. And the conclusion of this Gemara is broader than this one page, which is to say that the din of Shmuel is not subject to a machlokes tanaim, like we thought we were trying to say. So again, just to say Shmuel one more time, just so we can walk away from this section with an ikr nakuda here. So the Gemara says that Shmuel holds that if you have a loan of 1,000 and your mashkon is a lower value than 1,000, $5, $10, $100, Shmuel held that if you lose the mashkon, the malva, if you lose a mashkon, you lose the whole loan. And the lova never has to pay you back. Because Shmuel held that the loan was not just representative, Shmuel held that the mashkon was not just representative of the loan. It took on and embodied the loan itself. So that means I, the malva, didn't treat it the right way. I lost it? Okay, then I lost all the money that's connected to it. Hadron alach Shavuos hadayonim. Baruch Hashem, we finished another parak of Shasi Ratzon. We should come back to this daf in about 7.5 years. What we're going to do now is begin this parak and learn the whole Mishnah. The Mishnah is extremely long, and it will take us to the end of the short lines plus one word on Mem Hey Amud Aleph. A lot of this will be cryptic because we're going to need to unpack it. That is typically the nature of Mishnayos. But Emir Hashem will have the opportunity to do that over the course of this week. Speaking of which, I most definitely will not be here on Wednesday. I have a fundraiser. I already told you, if you pay what I need to fundraise, I'll be here Wednesday. If you don't really love me, then I understand. But I blame him too. See you Thursday. I see where the cards have fallen, Stan Gertz. I see. Says the new Mishnah, Baruch Hashem, the parak Kol HaNishbain, learning more klalim around the halachos of Shavuos. Kol HaNishbain shebatorah. Whenever we talk about a Shavuot that's in Chumash, Nishbain v'lo mishalmin. We're typically talking about cases where you make a Shavuot and you therefore don't have to pay. It's a Shavuot of absolving. It's not a Shavuot of paying, typically. However, ve'elu nishbain v'notlim. But there are some cases where you make a Shavuot and then after your Shavuot you actually take something. Ha-sachir, an employee, v'ha-nigzal, someone who was stolen from, v'ha-nechbal, someone who was injured, and the case which we saw earlier, v'shechanegdo chashur al Shavua, when we're talking about someone who you're in Bezdin with, but that person can't make a Shavua because they're not reliable people. They can't make a Shavua for a host of reasons. And lastly, v'chen b'ni al pinkaso, when we talk about a store owner and his QuickBooks account. We don't know what this means yet. We'll see the Ketzads in our Mishnah, but they'll still remain somewhat unclear. Let's go through some of these examples about halfway down on Mem Dalet Amud Beis, 4 lines into the new parak. Hasachir Ketzad. What is the case of a sachir? Amar lo, tein li schari sheyesh li biyadcha. I worked for you. You owe me some money. Please pay me. And the owner, the adon, says, "Hu omer nasati. I already paid you. V'hala omer lo natalti. I didn't take anything." So then the halacha is, Hu nishba v'notel. He, that is the sachir, can make a shavua and take his salary. It's a very unique din, because it really is he said, but the Torah says in such a case that he is allowed to make a shavua. However, Rabbi Yehuda Omer, not so fast. The shavua of a sachir trying to make a trying to make a promise to get his claimed salary. Can't happen that easily. Ad shetehesham miktsas hoda. We need there to be a shtickle agreement between the two parties. Ketzad, what does that look like? So Omar lo, tein li schari 50 dinar sheyesh li biyadcha. You owe me 50 dinar. Vu omer he's kabalt dinar zav. A dinar zav is the equivalent of 25. So I only got 25. So that's the case, says Rabbi Yehuda, where the sachir could make a shvua and be notel. However, if it's just pure he said, you owe me money, and the other person says, no, I don't, then, according to Rabbi Yehuda, you can't make a shvua. So that's a machlokas tanoim as to what the threshold is when a sachir can make a shvua. Says the Gemara, Nigzal Ketzad, what's the case of someone who was the victim of theft? So someone came into your property to take something. Omer, the claim was, Kelai notalt, you took something of mine. Vu Omer, lo natalti, I've taken nothing of yours. So, as a chiddush, the Nigzal can say, Hu nishba v'notel. Again, it's he said, and he can just make a shvua. Here too, Rabbi Yehuda puts in the same limiter. You can't just have, otherwise you could always do that. You just keep going over to people and say, you stole something from me, according to the Tanna Kama. Rabbi Yehuda is not comfortable with that type of public policy. So he says it's not how a halacha works. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ad shetesham mixas hoda. There has to be some agreement. Ketzad, what does that look like? Omar lo shnei kelim notalti. You took 2 kelim from me. V'hu Omer, the guy who was the trespasser, said lo notalti ela echad. And then you can make a shvua because at least they're talking the same language. But according to the Tanna Kama, where they're just 2 ships passing in the night, if I say you broke into my property and took something and you say no, you don't, I get to make a shvua that you stole. Mechatesi. So that's why Rabbi Yehuda doesn't like the Tanna Kama. Nechbal Ketzad. Let's talk about a case scenario where someone is injured. I go into a meeting with you. I'm all clean and neat and put together. I come out with bruises and a bleeding lip and a split nose. I'm a mess now. You beat me up. You owe me some money. The chameshes payments, ripui, boshes, everything. You hurt me. You omer lo chavalti. I didn't touch you. The victim can make a shvua and say, guys, look at what happened over here. I walked into the room with the mob boss. I came out beaten up. You owe me some money. Here too, Rabbi Yehuda puts in the same exact limiter as he does in all the other cases. It's a theme. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, ad shetei sham mixas hoda. You can't just make a shvua and collect. There has to be at least some some agreement between the two baalei din in order for this to be true. Says the Gemara, Ketzad, what would be the case? Omar lo chavalt b'shtayim. You punched me in 2 places, right cheek, left cheek. V'hala Omar lo chavalti b'chayil achas. I only hit you 1. Oh, so there, that according to Rabbi Yehuda is where you can make a shvua. But what the Tanna Kama said, that's a free-for-all. Maybe I bumped into a cabinet. Maybe I walked into a wall. Truth is crazier than fiction. So there's no reason to assume necessarily. Yes, I understand the context. You walked in, nobody else was there. I've hurt myself with no one in the house before. I'm a very capable person. So then the fact that other people are in the room means that they're definitely guilty. Rabbi Yehuda says, no, we need a higher threshold in order to make a shvua. Bottom line of Mem Daled and Beis, the Gemara says, Sheknegdo chashud ala shvua ketzad. What's the case that we're dealing with? Where one of the baalei din is chashud ala shvua. Says the Gemara, Achas shvua sa'edus, whether or not we're talking about shvua sa'edus, which we learned about. Ve'achas shvua sapikadum, which we also learned about. Ve'afilu shvua shav, even in a case where a person is making a ridiculous shvua. Or, haya echad men mesachek bekubia, you have a person who makes their money by gambling, umalve beribis, or you have a person who lends ribis, umafricha yonim, people who race pigeons, the sochre shvis, people who are being osek in the world of shvis during a shemitah year when they're not allowed to, shekenegdo nishba v'notel. What that means that the other person can then make a shvua because their plaintiff that they're dealing with is nothing. It's really not the plaintiff; it's the defendant who's chashud. So then the plaintiff can then make a shvua and be nota. What if, here the Mishnah is adding an iteration, hayu shnehem chashudin, what if they're both chashud? They're both mafricha yonim or one, whatever, all of the things above that you're not supposed to do. Chazra shvua l'mekoma, then the shvua goes back to the first person. How does that work? The guy's chashud ala shvua. Why do we trust him as far as we can throw him? Nothing. We shouldn't trust him at all. So that's the next line is Rabbi Yossi. Then Reb Meir says, Omer, Yachloku, forget the Shavuot. You guys are not allowed to talk. You're totally zeros. So we'll have to figure out why Reb Meir was okay with that. We'll deal with that in Mutash. What?
You think sure you can't. The fact that I'm a no good Nick,
Right.
why should I lose out?
It's no, you're saying Reb Meir.
Yeah.
No, that I understand. I just don't understand the
No,
Tanakh.
Since neither one can make a shul, they don't have to do that.
Because in Brera,
It's your problem.
what are you supposed to do?
Second anyway.
Yeah, but what other option is there? Yachloku is what we do and we're stuck.
Or make a shul you.
So you lose the whole thing.
It's not nice anyway. You should just pay me. Whatever.
The Tanaim don't agree with you. Yeah. The Tanaim definitely don't agree with that.
Yes, he does.
No.
What is Chosel and Cohen?
It means that guy makes a shvuah.
Yeah, if he makes.
Yeah, that's why I don't understand it. Because he's chashir al shvuah. And Rashi says, "B'gemara mafarish lo." So this is something we'll have to figure out because Reb Meir's shita seems very odd. Not Reb Meir. Rabbi Yossi's shita seems very odd. Correct, but the words seem that way. Yeah, we'll see. And lastly, the last case that we're going to discuss now, which is a case of nishboin v'nodlin, which has been our category of the Mishnah, is v'hachen v'ni al pin kaso. So it says the Mishnah, Ketzad, we're on Mem Hey Amud Aleph, about 8 lines down, heading to the Gemara, about 8 lines from the bottom. What's the case? Ketzad? Lo, the case is not sheyomer lo kasuv al pin kasi shatachav v'masayim zuz. That's for sure not the case, which is interesting. The Mishnah doesn't usually do that. Let me tell you what it isn't. It's very rare, but we don't want there to be any lack of clarity because otherwise, if I was a charlatan, I could just write down, Stan owes me 100, Gerald owes me 1,000, Avi's going to pay the gap in my Reach campaign. It's going to be amazing. We don't do those things. Ella, what's the case? Omer lo, tain libni sosayim chitin. Give my son 200 units of 2 saw of wheat. Tain lepoali selamos. Give my worker a little bit of money. And who omer, the owner says nasati. Vehein omer lo natalnu. So then who nishba v'notel? Vehein nishba v'notel. So that the store owner is nishba v'notel. Vehein, the recipients are nishba v'notlin. They also seemingly make a shvuah. Well, that's a little difficult. What do you mean that all of them are making shvuas? If both people are making shvuas, then something is shver. Amar ben nanas, ketzad elu ve'elu b'ayni de shvuah shav. You're saying that halachically they should both make a shvuah? Pashut, someone's lying. We don't set up scenarios like that in halacha, where by definition someone is gonna say a shvuah shav. So ben nanas doesn't like that. And we'll have to figure out what exactly is going on when we get to the Gemara. It says the Gemara, Elahu notel shalo b'shua. One person takes without shua. The hey notlin shalo b'shua. Cryptic as can be. We don't even know. Everybody's going to take? Okay, we have to see in the Gemara. Very, very unclear piece of Mishnah, intentionally so, of course. And the following cases are really not connected to the Elu Nishbain V'Notlin of our Mishnah, but once we were talking about a Chenveni, the Mishnah stops in other cases of Chenveni, but they're really not shaykh to the Shua piece over here so much. I mean, they're discussing connected issues. Here we go. Amar L'Chenveni, a man says to the store owner, Tain li b'dinar peiros. I would like a dinar's worth of peiros. And then the store owner was V'Nasanlo. He gave me my fruit. So Amar lo tain li oso dinar. The store owner says, I gave you the fruit, now pay me the dinar. Amar lo, the purchaser says, nasati v'lach, I paid you. Unasato be'un palya. And you put it in your cash register, your purse. So then you shava bala shenasan lo esadinar. So then the purchaser just makes a shvur that he already paid. Done. Let's talk about the reverse. Third of the way down on Mem Ham and Aleph. Amar lo tainli es haperos. Let's say that I gave the store owner the dinar first. I paid him first. Then he goes to the back of the store and he comes back. He doesn't have my fruit. I said, I paid you a dinar. Tainli es haperos. Where are the fruits that I just bought from you? So the Mishnah continues. Amar lo nasatim lecha v'holachtim lesoch beisecha. I did give you the fruits. You went home and you put it in your house. Says the Gemara, Yishava Chenveni. In such a case, the Chenveni is the one who gets to make the Shavua, and whatever his Shavua is, he doesn't have to give anymore. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, and this is really the lumdus of the last two cases, Kol Shab Peros Biyado, Yado Al Ha'elyona. Wherever the fruit is, wherever the product that you're buying is, that is what governs who gets to make a shvua and where the halacha leans. This is obviously because of the deeper principle of hamotzi mechaveru olav araya. You can't take stuff out of my possession without a raya. We don't have any cameras. Okay, then I get to make a shvua, and it works out in my favor.
Why don't you say that with the others?
With what?
With like the the storekeeper before that, it's whoever has it in their hands.
What was the case of the storekeeper before?
The one before that, where the oath returns the coma.
Yeah.
That why doesn't it just stay? The one who has it stays in. Why is it possible they split it?
Good question. Ayushneim chashudin chazara shavua lemakoma. What was that case? Oh, that was the case of
We don't
chicken.
know exactly.
We don't really know what the case is. That's true.
Yes,
But
that
the case was chashud al hashvua. It's a case of nishbain v'notlen. It might work that way, actually. It might work that way. We'll have to come back to that because I don't know what that case actually is. But our Mishnah calls that case nishbain v'notlen. All the cases of our Mishnah up until now are cases where a person makes a shvua and they get what they promise about. So it very well could be, to your question, that is what's happening in those cases. We just have to unpack them in the Gemara to see. Now, we spoke about a case of me going to the fruit store and dinar and payros. Let's talk about similarly, if I give my American dollars in and now I want to get shkalim back. So it says the Gemara, Amar l'shulchani tein li b'dinar ma'os. We're going to do a cash change. I'm going to give you some American dollars. You give me back some coins that are shkalim v'nasan lo. And he gave me the money. Amar lo tein li asar dinar. So the Kaspomat guy says, I gave you the shkalim. Now you give me the American dollars. Amar lo nasati v'lach v'nasato be'unpela. You put it away already. Yishava balabais. He gets to make a shvua that he in fact does not have it, and then he gets paid again. Nasan lo asar dinar. Let's say that the dinar, the money was given, but the Kaspomat guy didn't pay me in my shkalim. Amar lo, tein li asamos. I gave you the dinar, give me back my mos. Amar lo, the change store owner says, nasatim lach v'yishlachto l'soch kischa. You put it in your pocket. You shava shulchani. Rabbi Yehuda Omer, in cases like this, ein derech shulchani litain isar ad she'itol dinar. These cases are not comparable to the previous cases. It's bulletproof glass. He's not giving you any shkalim till you slide the $100 bill through the bulletproof glass. Again, different psychologies. But when we're talking about money changers have a different hakpada. It's a different. I agree. I think we'd all agree. In a store where, let's say, I'm paying cash for fruit, so I could see me giving the money first and them giving me the fruit first, or vice versa. Not when it comes to a Costco man. That's not what's happening. I'm giving the 100 first, slide it under the window. He verifies it, makes sure it's real, and then he counts his shkalim and slides it back under and throws a receipt at me. Okay, halfway down on Mem Hamid Al. Kishem sha'ab amru hapogemes ksuvasa lo tipara el b'shvua. Just like we said that hapogemes ksuvasa, this is referring to a woman who said that she received only part of her ksuva, that for her to collect more, she can't get paid more el b'shvua. And ve'ed echad me'ida shehi prua, and if there is a witness that testified that she, this woman, prua, was fully paid, lo tipara el b'shvua, that if she really says she really wasn't, then she has to make a shvua. Also, when we're talking about her taking from nechasim mishubadim or from properties of orphans, lo tipara ela b'shvua, so too she cannot collect for her ksuba from those places unless there's a shvua. As well, v'hanifra'as shelo b'fanav, a wife who's collecting a payment for a husband, but he's in b'medinas hayam, lo tipara ela b'shvua. The Gemara says, while all of those are true, v'chein, similarly, hayasomim, when it comes to orphans, lo yifra'u ela b'shvua. They also have to make a shvua. What is their shvua? Shvua shelo piktano abba. We have no pikadon from our father. V'lo amar lanu abba. He told us nothing about it. V'shelo matzinu bein shtarosav shel abba sheshtar zeparua. I have no data. So they have to make that shvua when they're trying to collect from others, just like the Isha, who's in questionable scenarios in regards to her ksuba. Rabbi Yochanan ben Baruch extends this. Omer, afilu nolad ben la'achar mitzasav harei nishba b'noto. A child who's born posthumously, even after his father died, the child is still allowed to collect with a simple shvua. He's a yosem. It's not. He doesn't have to be alive at the same time. He doesn't have to be alive when the father dies. It's not such a big jump, but the Gemara does add that in. Amar Reb Shimon ben Gamliel, im yesh edim she'amar ha'ab, im yesh edim she'amar ha'ab b'shas misaso, that the father said on his deathbed, shtar ze eino parua, that the following shtar was not paid, who notel shelo b'shvua, then it gets paid even without a shvua. He's a shchiv meira, we believe him. Ein adam chote v'lo lo, as we said the other day, he's going to tell the truth. And then lastly, ve'elu nishbayin shelo b'taina. There are some people who make a shvua even when no evidence is presented against them. Fascinating. What is this? This is like classic business partnerships. Hashutfin, if I work together with you, ha'arisin, sharecroppers, v'ha'aputropin, people who are property managers, v'isha hanoses v'anosenes besoch habayis, a woman who is managing the business affairs of her husband, v'chein uben habayis, and someone who lives in the house. Amar lo, ma'ata to'anini. What are you claiming against me? I've done nothing wrong. So says the Gemara, it doesn't matter. Ritzoni shetish bali. We're partners. I just want to keep you on the straight and narrow. Please make a shvua that you haven't taken more money than you're supposed to. Simple. So the halacha is chayiv. That's a lot of latitude. It keeps your business partners on their toes. That halacha l'maisa, you're allowed to. It's actually quoted in Shulchan Aruch. Halacha l'maisa, you're allowed to be mashbia your partners in business to make sure that they're yashar, which is a scary prospect. Again, it's a built-in system, but only if they're erlich, because otherwise they'll lie through their teeth. The punishments for shvuas are horrible, but I know we don't live in the most erlich of generations. However, chalko ashutfin, if the partnership dissolves, so now I don't really work with you anymore, v'harisin, or if the arisin also, if they don't work it together anymore, then enu yachol lashbi pasha way. If we're no longer tethered to one another, you can't walk over to a random guy and say, "I want to make sure you're being honest. I'm not in your world anymore, but make me a shvua." So that pasha, there's no latitude. However, if after our working relationship dissolves, but now I'm able to make you make a shvua on an unrelated matter, then I can be megalgel shvua mimakam acher, megalgel anav zakol. Then I can even make you make a shvua on your yashrus in your business on our. That's a big jump. And lastly, for tonight, the hashvius mishametes es hashvua. When it comes to shvius, when it comes to a shmita year, so that's mishametes es hashvua. That dissolves the need to make a shvua. We'll have to see what that means. We'll pause right here. Wishing you all a beautiful night.
Case where the son is born after the